Go ahead.
Cool. Well, hi, I'm Dave Sellinger. I'm the guy who started this meetup group almost 10 years ago now, and its time has definitely. I think it was like the neatest possible timing because we assembled a group of people and a process and a way that we kind of talk about AI over the course of the first few years, and then it started really, really, really taking off, and we had all the momentum and tools so that we've been able to do that. I don't know how many folks on here are new. Elaine just introduced herself. She said she's new. I recognize some of the other names, but is there anybody else who wants to stand up and say hi and introduce themselves? Yay, nay? You can just
Okay.
unmute yourself and talk if you want to.
I'm just unmuting to test my mic and see if it works now mostly, but
You're good, Warren.
you're good. Okay, cool, sweet. Yeah, I'm well for what it's worth. I'm thankful that you guys started this thing up. It's been super educational for me as somebody who's not doesn't have a traditional background, so happy for
Well,
it.
cool. I'm excited to get to. I haven't presented in almost a year. Oops, Kevin was about to speak. Go ahead, Kevin. Oops, or maybe not.
Which Kevin? Yeah. Yeah, my name is Kevin Kotchak. I'm the founder CEO of Chemical Q Device. I do a paper a month and I work on these LLM models every single week, pretty much.
Cool.
Cool.
Well, welcome everybody. This week's going to be a little bit different. Usually we do mostly technical, like we'll cover technical topics or technical papers, and we'll watch videos together to try to understand those. This week's a little bit different. So we have a little Slack group that talks about the agenda, and we were looking at, hey, how do we plan out a little bit further? And in the interim, I thought it would be neat to shake things up a little bit, and especially since I haven't been attending as regularly, to present a little bit more on the applied side. What are the non-data scientists of the world doing with LLMs, and how do they think about it? And certainly I can't claim to have the answer to that question because I think that's just a broad topic. So the goal I have for today is to more than present, just to kind of facilitate a conversation. And so yes, Warren says he has a meetup on Fridays. So I think it'd be awesome if I get as much participation in this as humanly possible. I did put together a bunch of slides. I've got like 30 or so slides. If I use 5 of them and we have a great discussion, that's a win. If we use all 30 and it's a great discussion, that's a win. If I use all 30 and it's not a great discussion, that's a lose. So happy to kind of help facilitate this as best as possible. I'll introduce myself a little bit more in terms of my background. My background's been in machine learning for about 25 years. I started at Stanford and ran the first AI team at Amazon for a number of years there. I founded an AI and data company called Redfin, which was just acquired by Rocket Mortgage this last month or this last quarter. And then started another couple of AI companies, and I'm currently at one called Deep Sentinel. And so I'll go ahead and send the request to my friend Jerry so that I can share my screen here and kind of walk us through some of the thoughts I put together on how to think about LLMs. And so the idea really is to kind of share a data scientist perspective on the rest of the world. What is the rest of the world doing? And one of the first things that happened to me that I thought was interesting when I was even preparing for this was yesterday. I was pulling open a bunch of Excel files to share with you guys, Excel files that were generated by AI, and I got the Copilot announcement. As you guys know, Microsoft has a license for all of the models that are used by OpenAI through their universal, whatever exclusive license that they've got there. And what I think is interesting, though, is that what we're all seeing is the life interruptions, right? As consumers and maybe employees of businesses or business owners in certain cases, we're seeing that in every one of our tools, from the announcement banner in Gmail trying to get you to sign up for Gemini. If you're using Gmail for business, you are getting an ad every day to sign up for Gemini. You're getting an ad on Figma to use their new AI tools. For the last 6 months, we've been getting advertisements from Zoom to use not only their summary and transcript features, but some of the more advanced features as well. And it's really amazing to me how quickly this technology has turned from something that exists in small spheres like this into permeating every circle of our lives. I just got home from visiting my dad at his assisted living place, and even like the 80-year-olds were sitting around dinner. I have dinner with 80-year-olds every night, which is also a totally different life experience if you're ever interested in talking to me about that. But we sit and talk about AI too, and they're like, how do I should think about it? What should I be doing? Should I be scared? And it's a really pervasive topic. And so what I thought I'd do is just do a little bit of groundwork, and then again, open this up for any and all discussions from people out there. What I wanted to talk about at first was like what I at least view the difference between AI and the theoretical side. I created a little bit of a model for how I think about the different types of users, but that model's apparently incorrect. Do you know how I know it's incorrect? Because I asked ChatGPT, and ChatGPT told me the correct answer. So anyway, this was the way that I was thinking about presenting LLM users: was experts that are people that are using them every day, and they're either teaching others how to use LLMs, or they're teaching their companies how to do it. There are professionals. There are people that are building them. There are people that are building them into their tools. They're integrating them. There's conversationalists. We don't have to talk about them. Enthusiasts, like these are the most exciting people. Go on Reddit, you'll find a trillion of them. And then you've got your casual users, which are like your family members that maybe you're still teaching them how to log in using a password that's more than 4 characters, or what 2FA is, but they're still excited about LLMs and AI. And then where I wanted to spend the most time today was talking about all the crazy use cases that I'm seeing out there, because I think this is the starkest contrast. So if you have a data scientist, somebody, you kind of imagine us sitting in a cave somewhere, not interacting with other human beings, building this thing and then throwing it out of our cave. And this is kind of an opportunity to just talk about how everyone outside the cave is using this. And I came across a bunch of them. I thought I would share the ones that I came across, and then again, really encourage folks to participate there, and then talk a little bit about what I'm thinking about it. So if that's an okay agenda, I'll go ahead and dig in. Any comments or questions on the agenda before we go in?
Sounds
Good.
cool.
Works
Okey-dokey.
for me. Elaine, works for me.
Love it, Elaine. Thank you. If you're going to keep commenting, we're going to ask to see your face eventually, so we can we can all see you. I'm just kidding. And
All
everyone's
right, it's
welcome.
not a pretty face tonight. I'm a daily user, Chat, Gemini, Copilot. I use them all. I love it.
Very cool. I love
And
hearing
I'm
that.
an 80-year-old.
Hey,
Hey,
you know what? You're the person that I need to introduce my dad to. My dad loves saying, "I'm 80, so I can't use technology." And then we go to like the phone store, and he runs into this other guy that's 80, and he's showing him my dad all the apps he's using. And my dad was trying to say, "Look, he doesn't use it for anything," and he was wrong. So I think the other neat thing is that it is accessible to everyone. I think it's really amazingly accessible.
true.
So applied versus theoretical. Some of the things that I was thinking about, we're just kind of giving some examples of the types of questions that I really focused on in terms of framing this presentation today, in terms of the applied side, which is really what are the problems I can solve? How do I get it to do that? There's a term, Ted's not with us today, but so Ted Key and I work together at Deep Sentinel, and he's our chief data scientist, so he's much smarter than I am, but he hates the term prompt engineering, and with good reason. It's like the same reason those of us who taught ourselves machine language and C hate script kiddos, right? Because they don't really, it's not the same kind of coding. But at the end of the day, it's more powerful. It's more expressive. It gives you the ability to accomplish what you want faster, better, cheaper, easier. And so I think that a part of the applied discussion, the very first lesson that I would like to push across the transom would be that I think that all of us who are elitist data science engineers need to embrace the fact that that prompt engineering is going to be a real trade, and prompt engineering is going to be amazing, and it's going to be powerful and impactful and important. And if we try to be elitist by sitting on the I know how propagation works, then I think we're going to miss out. Honestly, I think there's a lot of value to be made in the use of LLMs in the application side. And I think we're starting to see that, because with the next question I put here is, can I make money by building something on top of this? And I'll talk about a lot of different ways that I think that this is such a huge revolution that it opens up the opportunity for people who don't have economic opportunities right now to reach the next level of whatever socioeconomic tier they want to achieve. That's melting, right? In the same way that crypto allowed a lot of people to kind of jump up in the socioeconomic whatever that is, pyramid. I think the same thing's going to happen with AI, and I think we're already starting to see a ton of it. And then can I make money by figuring these things out and then selling my expertise? That's the other one that's happening a lot, and I gave some examples of that, where there's an entire class of experts now that are teaching people not how to build AI, not how to engineer AI, but just how to make money on it. So what's the name of the guy that we really hated that did the AI videos on how ML, or I hated at least?
Oh, what was his name?
Right.
Let me guess.
Like
Wes Roth? Is that one of the?
No.
It was an Indian guy, Suresh.
Yeah, Suresh.
and but you know what? That guy kicked all of our asses because he made a ton of money. So like, I get mad. And so that's the example that I'm trying to give, is like, you can stand on your ivory tower and claim your superiority complex just as much as you want, but at the end of the day, kicked ass and made like $15 million by making videos, just reading papers on the internet and like using lots of arm movements and stuff. So I think my second thing that I would push across the internet here to you guys would be, I would push us to be more open to learn from those folks as well, because I think there's a lot when everything is new and everything is new to everyone has a chance to learn from everyone else. And the example I'll share there is with my AI team. So Ted leads an AI team, and we had him test some stuff with LLMs, and they failed. And they had done like this one prompt that they knew was right, and it explicitly stated exactly what they wanted the LLM to do. And the answer is Siraj. Thank you, Brady.
Yep.
I don't know you, Brady, but you're right. That's the right answer. Somebody actually made me a T-shirt or a poster or something that said "I hate Siraj." I get so irritated at him sometimes. But with my AI team, just continuing that example, what we found was that the people that aren't on the data science team actually beat everyone on the data science team because they weren't afraid to try a new prompt. The AI team was like making the most meticulous, particularly correct prompt. Oh, there's Ted. Ted just joined. But then what happened was two people outside of the AI team who are not engineers went and instead tested 15 different prompts, and they got the answers they wanted. And it sucks. I'm talking about you, Ted Key, in case you didn't notice. Sorry. He has his camera off because he's mad at me. Sorry about that, Ted. But I thought it was a really good lesson, right? Because I tend to be one of those people that's like, I taught myself machine language. I hate script kiddies. That's BS. But when you see the actual result, that at the end of the day, sometimes people who don't know as much get better answers just by doing more experimentation and being more willing. That's a good sign that we're having a complete paradigm shift, to use Thomas S. Kuhn's analogy here, in technology, that the underlying assumptions of technology are all breaking. And so therefore, all of my expertise that I built on the prior paradigm, all of that expertise is not worth as much as somebody who's willing to try out all of the new stuff in the new paradigm. So I'll move on and talk a little bit about like how I've kind of thought about the different tools.
I jump in here on just
yes.
that. Yeah, there was a thought that came to mind with regard to script kiddies, and then also the like paradigm shift thing. So at least for me, I am pretty new to software engineering in general. I started like around 3 or 4 years ago doing like a coding boot camp. But the paradigm shift thing had occurred to me as well. So the way that shaped, I guess, like how I go about software engineering is something that, especially when models were worse, I got a lot of heat from quote unquote real engineers or people that had traditional engineering backgrounds, because I was like, okay, in theory, if this is a paradigm shift, I can't beat the guys who've already been doing this stuff for 20 years. There's no way I'm ever going to be better than any of them. But everybody's starting from zero right now. So if I just go all in on this thing and I learn only these patterns,
100% yes.
LLMs, then I can actually have an edge in the market. And so that's the direction that I've headed. And my sort of favorite or thing that happened with me is like when I was interviewing for an engineering team, so I was going over like my stack, but my stack is which LLMs I'm using. So they were like, "Oh, so you're not really an engineer; you're more of like an AI PM." And I was like, "Well,
let's go."
Yeah.
My favorite, but now I'm like trying. Like my latest venture is doing consulting on effectively how to manage multiple code generation agents at the same time, which
Dude,
yes,
I bet you're killing it, right?
Yeah.
Because the number of people who have made that decision to solve that problem and become experts at it is going to be minuscule, because the period of time over which that marginal incremental decision is made is only 3 months or 6 months, right? And so even if 5% of all people make that decision over the course of their lifetime, when you reduce that to just the 6 months that we've had, you get this massive advantage. And the example, again, I'm going to use Thomas S. Kuhn, and I didn't intend on talking about this, but like this is Thomas S. Kuhn's model.
Currently can't see your screen.
Or you. Oh, there you are.
So,
You're
oh,
muted.
we lost your voice.
Muted.
Sorry, Zoom crashed. So for those of you that are familiar with Kuhn, this is his model of this. It's called the structure of scientific revolutions, and and again, if anybody here is a Kuhnsian or a philosophy of science major or PhD, you will know that Thomas S. Kuhn, before he died, abandoned this model. So yes, that's okay. But you know what? I don't really care. I still believe in it, and he can not believe in it as he died. That's his problem, not mine. But the one example that he brought up was like the model of the atom, right? And the model of matter. And that prior to the discovery of this new paradigm where we say matter is comprised of these atomic units that are called atoms, what did we have before? We had earth, wind, fire, and water, right? Like, and you had these incredible experts on earth, wind, water, and fire. And it's really easy to make fun of those experts now from our position in the 21st century because we know they're idiots, right? But at that moment in time, you had people who had had decades of social expertise built up around being experts in water, wind, fire, and water. And the new people who emerged and became experts in the atomic model, all of a sudden, even if you only had 6 months of expertise, and this is Warren's example exactly, they were the smartest people in the room because they could predict scientific outcomes, they could predict the chemistry outcomes, they could predict mixtures and all these other things that nobody else could predict. And the whole normal science model that had occurred around water, wind, fire, and good God, earth, and then they started discovering like, hey, that doesn't work. Like there's these other things that are happening. There's other things that are happening, and then you have a crisis, and somebody comes up with the new model around the atomic model of matter, and then you have science start developing more lessons around that. It's in this phase right here, which Warren's kind of commenting on. You have this new paradigm emerge, and it's the people that jump into making the iterative improvements based on this new paradigm who win in the ensuing, immediate period of time. And it's the people who are still stuck back here who kind of stand again on their ivory tower and they're the elitist, like, you're not an engineer, Warren. Well, sure, okay, cool. I'm not an engineer. Do you mind if I go solve all these problems that you could never solve in a million years? I'm just gonna go do that.
Neither are you anymore.
Right? Like, it's cool. Call me whatever you want. I'm just gonna go be rich and successful, and you can be a pud in the sand. And then in 100 years, we'll make fun of you. And so I love this model from Kuhn because he does it using, again, his original was using the atomic matter atomic model of matter, and we can look back and see how silly those pundits were to kind of stick with the old model. But then when we're in the midst of it, the human behavior pattern, if you're an expert from over here, is to stay resistant. And so the other reason I'm really excited about getting to present this is because I'm not saying you shouldn't go learn about backpropagation. You shouldn't learn about the new models of attention and all that other stuff. But what I am saying is that this part is really exciting. A lot of things are going to change in the immediate time frame. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Any other comments or thoughts from anybody?
Yeah, Dave. So in the Kuhn model,
This voice sounds like Jayant. Is that right?
it is me. Oh my gosh, I have just J over there. I should change that. It is
How are
me.
you, sir?
Good, sir. How are you doing? Thank you for the presentation. That the Kuhn model is really interesting. I understand the last two parts of it, the paradigm shift and the one before that.
Do you want me to spend a little time on the other ones?
You muted yourself, Janet. There you go.
Oops, sorry.
There you go. You're back.
Sorry about that. So yeah, I was just curious if it's possible to map the other. I'm just curious what the other things relate to. Is that?
Yeah, sure. I'll spend just a second talking about those ones. So again, I'm going to use the analogy of and I'll use the next paradigm shift, which goes from the atomic model to the nuclear model, which is the nucleus with the proton and neutron and the electron model of science in a molecular model. And so when you I'm going to start with this paradigm shift. So we discover the atomic model of science, and then we perform normal science. What normal science means is I'm using this paradigm, which is the atomic model of matter, and I am performing a lot of experiments to test what that will predict in the situation of burning methane versus burning propane. In the example of burning wood, and whether if I put steam on it, whether X, Y, Z happens. Or you perform all of these experiments that do two things. They confirm the paradigm, right? So if I burn methane and I know, and it's a different atom, and I burn propane and I burn them at a specific temperature, I get different colors, and that happens everywhere. And so then it reinforces and solidifies and creates all this evidence that says this new paradigm is correct and is informative. The second thing it does is it discovers additional theorems that build upon it. So you have, like, at the center, you have this, like, there's an atom, but then you start building these additional theorems and lemmas and all that other stuff that say, like, hey, because there's atoms, we also are going to make the assertion that you can't break them. The atom is atomic and you can never break it. And that even if we take methane and we heat it really up high and then we cool it down a lot and then we perform the same experiments, it's still the same thing. It's still methane. We haven't actually changed its essence as an element. And that was kind of the introduction of atoms, right?
Right. So the paradigm change today is sort of, everybody using, I'll just say Gen AI, because it could be ChatGPT, it could be Claude, it could be whatever. So the paradigm changes that now, instead of like knowing software engineering, you can just, for example, you can just use this, right? And then the experimentation is like, well, there is, now Claude Code, which sort of added a layer on top of or any of the other CLIs, and then tomorrow there'll be something else that's going to come out that's different from these CLIs, and so on and so forth, right? So that's what you're saying, right?
Yes, exactly. And then there will be tools that bring CLIs together with graphic design. So then Figma creates a plugin straight into Visual Source Safe, and you're like, hey, create a diagram and a user interface that slides green bars across the screen while you do this, and then swipe right. and you're able to like do some pixel twiddling in combination with doing the vibe coding side.
Right. So what's model crisis? Or
So
like
then what happens is let me use this in the
okay,
atomic
sorry, yeah.
world. So what happens is you get model drift. So as these theorems develop, you start realizing like, hey, there's this funky thing that actually if I apply electricity to the element, the atomic element of water, I get two things. Like I get hydrogen and I get oxygen. And that breaks the atomic model of matter, right? Because that's the molecular model of matter. And so you start building up this evidence, which is called the model drift, where you accommodate it a little bit and you're like, well, actually what happens is those two atoms actually just coexist and that they're in the water. And so you prove without breaking the paradigm that that's still true. But then eventually you build up enough evidence that like, hey, no, it's not water plus hydrogen and oxygen. I'm pretty sure that there's two things here. There's hydrogen and oxygen, and they come together to make water. It's not a mixture of all three of those things. And then you have the revolution. So you build up the model crisis is an increase in the amount of evidence that says, yeah, we can kind of accommodate this, but we're having trouble accommodating more of that. The example of that in this current revolution, I'll talk about it getting to where we're at. I can't predict what that's going to be in the next phase of LLMs yet, to be honest.
Right.
But in terms of getting here, what that was the transition from structured models like CNNs and LSTMs to attention, right? This big thing, in my view, at least in terms of how we ended up going from CNNs and LSTMs and structured RNNs of various forms to everything gets better with attention, is that paper that Dave presented to us, whatever that was in 2019.
Attention is all you need.
That attention is all you need, and that was enough to then say, "Oh my God, I can now solve all of these things that you said you had to solve this way." The best example that I always think about is that paper that Hinton wrote, the reverse graphics paper, where he said the best way to figure out what something looks like is to create a reverse graphics engine. And that's model drift. That's like saying, let's take the existing model and then let's like just hammer it home. But it doesn't really, it doesn't feel good, right? Maybe it kind of accomplishes some of it, but it was massively, incapable to do anything except for this incredibly small sliver of problems. And it was incredibly computationally intense, and it was very esoteric and hard to understand. And now, and as we've seen with LLMs, they literally generate videos where you can take a frontal face picture of someone and turn them around. It'll fully predict not only what they look like from behind, but what they look like from behind with robustness frame over frame. So it's consistent. It's just completely consistent. And that's where you start seeing that model crisis that says this entire idea that the world is made up, that AI should be made up of LSTMs and CNNs and RNNs and all this stuff is wrong. Attention really is all you need.
Well,
cool. That's great. Yeah, thank you, Selly. Yeah.
To like put this another way, I guess, to see if I've solidified my understanding of it. I think for me, with the sort of model drift that we are seeing is that it's really hard to make like a general form of AI, because the way that we were approaching it was we can do RL, so we can learn one task, or we can do we can do more organized learning, but it's extremely compute inefficient. And the way that I sort of have this in my head is at first we were starting to think we were trying to think about solving the problem symbolically, kind of like the same way that I as a human would write down information. We like our sort of approach was to try and follow that pattern. But what actually sort of tips the scales is that if you start thinking about it rather than symbolically, you start thinking about it stochastically, where rather than attempt to write notes in the same way that I would, just try to process information generally in the same way my like general mechanism works, i.e., like humans pay attention to things and thus can sort of probabilistically line up their whole environment with how they are interacting with it effectively.
Yeah, I mean, at a high level, I think you're nudging on the observation that I would make, which is that if you make a fully connected model, so fully connected models in a neural network and a feed forward model are the proxy for a fully connected or for an associative model. And so the actual neural network inside of our brain is associative, right? So it doesn't process this way and then backward and then this way and backward. It just fires, and then everything nearby fires kind of relatively. And so we've approximated that using feed forward. But the problem with a feed forward is that the compute requirements are exponential in the number of nodes and connections, right? And so the model that we created that you're kind of referring to that tries to map it backwards was we imposed structural limitations on the feed forward to get rid of 99% of the feed of a fully connected model in creating a CNN. You're only connected to the things that are right next to you, or you're only connected to the things that are right next to you in specific patterns. Or in the context of LSTMs, you're only connected to them through this very specific memory, which has these specific tokens and these specific associations. And all of those things got supplanted by this model called attention.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that's been brought up so far is you really have to focus on what's new, because the field is moving so fast in terms of applications. Like every 2 or 4 weeks, we get a new model release. And it's not like how it was in 2023, where it's like, you're working in a specific machine learning workflow, you have to train on your own data. Now you have like exponential amounts of like new things that you could do. So something like OpenAI, which you can work across the field. If you pick a specific area, even if the models didn't improve today, you'd be able to publish every single month for at least 12 months, because there's so many things, so many areas that it's good at. And like Gemini has advantages too, Opus too, but like every new model
Gemini has no advantages, but that's a similar comment. I'm just
kidding.
No, I'm just kidding. I don't like Gemini very much, but it does have some advantages. You're right. I was just joking.
Yeah, well, keeping up with the models is a huge thing, because it's not really like anything in the past that we've seen with AI. Because like,
Evan, it's a great point. Just like the normal science of just assessing what this new version is good at in various ways is itself a full-time job.
Right, and the volume and the quantity of the data and the complexity of the data too. So, that's the thing. It's like somebody was saying, like in the past, it was so dependent on your experience and your history and stuff like that. But if you get on a roll with today's software, it's like exponential, because they keep getting better, more, not just more tokens, but more complexity and more areas too.
Yeah, I'm glad Jayanth, you asked me to go into depth on this, because I didn't have these slides initially in here, but I think the Thomas Kuhn model is really informative for those of us who are more kind of science leaning to analyze this. I'm gonna push us forward to get us to the use cases, if that's okay. Unless somebody,
can I say just one quick thing? So it also feels like this cycle seems to be getting faster and faster. I don't know if you feel that way. Like if you go from like, let's say, the Hopfield network to the deep models and then today I don't know where we are. It's like it feels faster. I don't know if you feel,
it's pretty bonkers. I definitely agree with you on that.
Absolutely. Or that's essentially or part of the edge has been like, even if I wanted to keep up with every single development in this field, it's physically not possible. And like that's what I was trying to do. And like I generally unemployed and just trying to make my own work. Well, anytime I didn't have my own work to work on was like, okay, try to keep up on what the latest is. And there's 6 papers, 3 of which are all marketing and 3 of which actually are step changes of some kind. And then there's 1 of them that actually is there every single day. So it's the paradigm change is very interesting. And then I left a little note in the chat window about it. But I think the other kind of or the model revolution, I think the 2 papers, or 1 paper, 1 note, is attention is all you need, And then the other one is the bitter lesson, if anybody's familiar or unfamiliar with that. In that the things that we figured out are like take a stochastic approach, pay attention, and then the other one was like stop trying to be clever, just find something simple that scales with as much compute as you can throw at it, and then throw as much compute as you can at it. And then I think those two conceptual things were what have gotten us into this number 5 stage that we're in at the moment.
Warren, I was going to say something kind of similar in that I think the models like the attention is all you need type of thing. That's like this real tight iterative loop that we're going through, and I think we've got a long ways to go there. The paradigm shift to me is really when we shifted and started, instead of telling the computer what to do, we showed it what to do. And then, as you pointed out, we started scaling the compute, just scaling the size of the data and the model. That seems like the real paradigm shift.
Yeah, I mean, and I think the world now is so much more complex than Kuhn's, in that the dimensionality of any one of these changes is pretty expansive and exciting too. So I still think it applies, but I think what you guys are raising is that there are so many when something like this happens of this scale, there's so many different parts that comprise it, right? Like if you think about the mobile revolution, it wasn't a mobile device, right? It wasn't GSM, it wasn't LTE. It was kind of the combination of all these things that all happened, and when they came together, everything changed, right? And so I think this is a potentially overly simplistic way of looking at where we're at today, but I think the principles still kind of help us kind of line up our brain cells. As I look at some of the different things, and this is, Warren, kind of where you were going as well, like there's different levels of this too, right? Like I don't think that you're trying to solve the problem of building ChatGPT. You're living over here in the world of like, what are the right ways to think about tools? And I also try to do my best to kind of break down the tools, but I'll use this as a segue to the point that I made about the different roles and personas of people in AI. So I came up with the ones that I thought of: experts, conversationalists, etc. And then I went and asked ChatGPT, what are the ways to do this? And I forget what exactly my prompt was, but it was, I'm trying to think about all these different dimensions. And ChatGPT, this is a neat answer because it both shows me one of the things that I think is my favorite thing about these different models is that it shows you different ways of looking at it. I'm a CEO of my company right now, and so one of the most important things that I do on a daily basis is I make sure that we're being comprehensive, we're being MECE, right? Mutually, to a certain degree, mutually exclusive, but really ensuring we're being comprehensively exhaustive in what we look at. And what's neat about ChatGPT is it presented me not with one way of doing this, but with 6 different ways of describing the personas, which is it's really great in that I can make sure that I've thought about all of these and then come up with my own. But like in one is level of expertise, this other one's by the level of interest, and it captured that as kind of like the conversationalist by the daily engagement level. A 3-dimensional matrix, yes, that's something that everybody can use. At least everybody at this meetup can use that. Buckets of personas, which I thought was interesting, and then by professional role. And I was like, wow, that's really cool. I hadn't thought about it in that way. Why don't you go ahead and show me a great 3-dimensional model? Completely understandable by 0 human beings ever in the history of time. So, it got us a good long way along. But it also shows that this is why I think prompt engineering is so important, because it clearly has the information to come up with something interesting. But it's really incumbent on me, and this is kind of going back to this model, me operating in normal science land, not operating and building a new ChatGPT or a bunch of code to process that, but in just messing around with my prompt so that I could instead of getting this messy thing, get something interesting.
I think you raise a point here, or something that occurs to me on this note is let's see, why is this behaving this way? is that um, because it's paradigm shifty, and as you mentioned, like people are sort of moving away from the use of the term like prompt engineering, or like some people are still using it, but we have like a new term for this that I've heard called context engineering, which I think is a much more complete way to think about the problem, which is end of the day, the problem is I want to get from the model, I want it to produce all and only the tokens that I need to accomplish my specific to sufficiently achieve my specific intent during this query, which for ChatGPT may be primarily prompting, but when you're directly calling the API, you what you want to be doing is composing the entire window and like thinking about how you're doing retrieval and things like that, to where you can, which I guess sort of like ties into our different users here, where I can either be like an end user of ChatGPT, the product only, and I can need that little cube, or I can be somebody who's building a thing that should produce cubes like that. And we have to think about kind of the same problem in very different ways, I guess.
You nailed it. I mean, that's exactly what I'm trying to get across here is that we've created an entirely new space of problem solving that didn't exist before. And it's a complex space. And there's lots and lots of different roles in this, even if you're not writing code, that have massive amounts of impact. And I think, again, whether we're picking on it or heralding it, I think I'm heralding it. The prompt engineering role to me is so incredibly powerful. And the fact that you can go from something that totally doesn't work to something that is better than state of the art by just changing the words that you pass in, or the context, or the framing that you pass into these models, tells me that itself is a space worth exploring and being an expert in. And that being able to do that, whether that's bringing in numerous models or telling you how to use this model for this and this model for this, and here's how to ask it the questions, that is a job. Like that is at least for right now, for as long as this period of time lasts. And that's going to be a really, really valuable job. That'll be the job that determines the success and failure of lots and lots of different projects.
I might also raise the point here for that prompt engineering is going to be different if you are, or prompt engineering GPT-5 is going to be a different thing than prompting ChatGPT. ChatGPT being an end user product, and both of them can, in theory, produce the same thing. But ChatGPT is going to be or talking with ChatGPT is going to be a very different experience than hitting the GPT-5 API and then getting a response back. So there's kind of like room for everybody to specialize in something, even if that is like using the end user product of a particular company that will help you sort of like accelerate your work for your company or whatever.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. And I think that's a good time for us to kind of talk about some different use cases here. And again, this is where I'd really love to hear stuff from other folks. I came up with a bunch of them that I thought were at least like worthwhile discussing. Some of the practical use cases, some of the hacky, whiz-bangy stuff that's out there. As always, with any major change in technology, and there's a lot of challenges to the social contract. How do we rethink what the social contract means? Do we allow the government to be the party that does this? Is there another way to get there? As we've seen, governments are always slow, right? Like they just finished regulating Facebook for the first round here in the last couple of years, and they did a great job. We should probably pay them more. They got to it quickly, and they did a good job. So I think Facebook's only been around for like 20 some years. So it's right on time. Anybody else for Bob again? Cool. So Julius, you want to say something?
Yeah.
Just wanted to add one thing to the previous discussion. My take right now is that what really matters is not how I engineer my prompt or engineer the context. What matters is how well can I describe what I want. And it seems like what really matters is that I know the right thing, that I know the vocabulary to use. In other words, the more you know about the domain and the more you know how you would be able to do it yourself, the more you can describe it in a way that really gets across And it feels more and more to me like I'm just talking to another person. And it's a person that has all the same background that I have. And if I just say everything really precisely, that's the best prompt. And and more is better. In other words, I don't have any sense that there's a specialization of prompt engineering. It's really just education in the domain, and that to me is the key. And of
So
course, it does matter.
I agree with you in certain cases that's the case. I've actually seen counterexamples where allowing the engine to do more and providing less context actually is more successful. So in certain areas where there are really strong colloquial chunks of information, like again, kind of you imagine the LLM in itself has a lot of information. I'll use an example from is Ted still on here? So sorry, Ted, I'm going to keep picking on this. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's cool.
All right. So what Ted and I were working on was a problem of describing the field of view on a camera and whether it had problems or not. And what we actually found, so we generated a whole bunch of prompts that we tried to tell the LLM what the types of problems are that we would see. And it turns out that if we spent an hour writing 3 paragraphs or 5 paragraphs about what we thought all the problems would be, that corpus of knowledge was so materially smaller than what was already available in all of the things that went into training ChatGPT, that just asking it, hey, what do you think about this camera and does it have any problems, was way better.
I think
And so,
you're both correct here effectively. And this goes to the context engineering thing, in that what both of you are doing in that task is you are creating the context window that has the correct tokens in the correct order to satisfy your intent. So the way Julius did that is he already knows those tokens because he works in the field. So what he's going to do is manually insert those tokens such that the area of latent space that the model is kind of surfing around is the place where he can find his answer. Whereas for you, you don't have the sufficient expertise to know exactly which of those tokens you'll need, but they are in there. So what you do is you kind of point it in the direction and you shove it and just let it ride and see if it can.
I think what I'm saying is a little bit different, though, Warren. Is that we do have experts. Like, that's what we do. We're experts in that. But that even by being an expert, that the a term from the early 2000s, right? The wisdom of the crowds is actually greater than the knowledge of any expert or even set of experts.
Yeah, and end of the day, what one is doing is trying to elicit from the model, which is effectively like the personified wisdom of the crowds, the correct behavior that will get you the thing you want. And often, just letting the model kind of drive itself there can be a much more effective way to get the response that you need. However, I think to Julius's point, it's more difficult to figure out what it is that you need if you don't have the sufficient domain expertise to know whether or not this is going to solve your problem now but trip you up later, kind of thing.
Yeah, I think to reduce bias, to run different models too. Like I'll ask a different model that I'm working on, but it's still like fluent in the area. What are the problems here? And you don't want to ask like pros and cons and all like that kind of stuff. Just it'll be brutally honest. It's the feedback that you need. To me, it might be more thorough than many peer reviewers. And if you're talking about other personas too, I see many use cases where you don't even need to have other people around because they're each of the different, manufacturers are going to have a different perspective, and probably they're going to be better than most other people's insight. It's just, that's the level of the software today.
Another point, if it does it your way, then you're better positioned to check it and follow it and just really be on top of it. If you give it a more general shove and it does it from another point of view, from a different community that you're used to, from your normal world of, vocabulary, then it's harder to check and be on top of it.
Yeah, I mean, this is all going to scale to the point. I mean, if we're at 1 million tokens right now, where no human being or group of people are going to be able to interpret your code of 10,000s or hundred thousands of lines in due time that a different AI model can. Like if you want another like additional insight, if you're using ChatGPT, use Gemini or use Grok or use, Anthropic.
Yeah, if I could just kind of jump in on this topic, I think since Selly used a couple examples from work, I think one of the big points is this is not like some deep philosophical thing. It's just like if I were to do kind of a silly analogy and say that like we went from cars to airplanes because the technology advanced so much. The fact that somebody's a race car driver and knows every nuance about how to drive a car is just not necessarily going to help him fly an airplane. And yeah, there are some people who probably know airplanes really well, and yes, but for the masses, like the person who has hundreds of hours flying an airplane might be able to do it better than a race car driver. It didn't matter that he used to be the expert. Just, I think that's the big message. Again, nothing super deep. It's not a statement about Claude or about Google. It's just like when things change that much, then you can't necessarily count on.
I would say in general,
yeah.
My observation for solving these problems is that the willingness to try different approaches is the highest probability of success. Sometimes it's longer, sometimes it's shorter. It's the willingness to do both and then just see what it does and then try it on a different engine and then compare them Julius, I want to agree with you, and I did, and Ted knows. Like I was one of the people that was like doing the highly prescriptive prompts and stuff like that early on, but I got my ass kicked. I got my ass kicked by people who were just willing to do, instead of saying this is the way to do it, they were just willing to say I'm just going to try 100 and I'll get back to you.
Well,
and they beat us every time.
I see the economies of the volume scaling to the point where it's like, okay, we'll have somebody else do this, but the AI has already not only thought of it, but completed the task. Because I think that we're at I don't know about Claude Code, but I'm at about 1,000 lines of code before ChatGPT conks out, Anthropic conks out, and I have to use Gemini. And it's not even a context length issue. It's a complexity, needle in the haystack, number of variables issue.
You got to try Claude then, because I'll jump into Claude if I can in just a second, because it kicks ass is the short answer.
Yeah, a real quick before we get off this topic, I think to the point of like trying weird stuff, here's a thing you could do. If you want a coding agent, you could tell the model, you are an expert software engineer and you are very good at TypeScript. Now give me some TypeScript code. Or you could tell the model, hey, you are 4 people. One is Linus Torvalds. Another one is a Leet Haxor spelled with 1337 specifically, because you'll get a different response if you don't spell it with the 1337. And a old hackathon judge and whoever my ideal customer profile is. And you are going to debate over which functions should go into this particular file. So the thing that something like that is doing is it's picking up all the semantic information that is nearby in the training corpus when somebody uses the phrase 1337 H4XOR. And you're tilting the output tokens that you're going to get so that you can fill the window with relevant tokens and then follow that with a follow-up query now that you have a particular kind of output that you can subsequently leverage to accomplish your task. So the I guess like the prompt engineering thing is like you can do really weird stuff because what you're doing is like surfing latent space of like this giant corpus of information. So using that semantic information that you know is there can be a very like powerful tool in terms of getting stuff done.
Like a form of temperature.
Absolutely, yeah.
Or what's it? Is it? Anyway, I was gonna try to come up with a physics analogy other than temperature, but what's that?
Simulated annealing.
That was kind of the direction I was going, right? Is that it's almost like simulated annealing, or Monte Carlo, right? Like which are two sides of the same coin, right? But where Monte Carlo is much more kind of, you're picking these samples out in space, and as long as the space is really powerful, and you've kind of defined it well, you're just doing so well, even if you're not doing a really informed guess. And that's when I've gone through and I kind of came up with a bunch of different use cases, and I started looking at how people are doing this. That was the observation I had amongst the people. I was looking for folks that were kind of doing the career advice and doing stuff, and none of these people had any grounds to comment on anything about, even the most basic 6-node, feed forward, fully connected network, like no knowledge. And they were kicking ass, just kicking ass and taking names and taking numbers. And they're giving advice, like they're helping people build AIs that give advice. And so there's some,
automated?
Sorry?
Could this be automated? Could you like take just a very straightforward prompt and then have an agent go off and have a kind of a dropout rate? And
so that's actually in the tips and tricks, is that a lot of people that are doing prompt engineering best practices, podcasts and videos, they're showing you how to like take a prompt and then send it to Gemini and say, hey, Gemini, can you write the best prompt that'll make ChatGPT actually do this correctly? Or you can send it to Claude similarly, or like, hey, ChatGPT, can you write a prompt so that Claude will write code to create an app that does this, this, and this for me?
Yeah. There are some papers on the topic as well. Prompt Reader is one of them, where they do evolutionary search across like a model that continually generates prompts.
And that's essentially, Warren mentioned the difference between GPT-5 and ChatGPT. If you look at like the actual logic flows of ChatGPT, that's a lot of the times what it's doing is it's reconfiguring the prompt and rethinking its own logic in order to. I had a couple of great ones. I haven't seen it in GPT-5, I haven't seen it in ChatGPT with GPT-5, but with GPT-4, where I'd ask it really complex math problems, and it would get them wrong, and it would be 6 paragraphs into the math problem, and it'd be like, checking it. Nope, that's wrong. Start over. And I was like, that was pretty rad that you did that.
And there was a period of time, or fun fact, I guess, that is a particular training innovation. To the look back and no, wait, I'm wrong, was not something they originally did in the RL paradigm. Originally, everybody was going like very, very naive, and it was working, or because it was working, which was just train it to have a think block and train it to make that think block longer. And the longer it went, the more performant it would get. But now that paradigm's been around for a little while, the people are starting to treat that as part of a context window optimization sort of problem, and then kind of trying to find the correct things that it should be thinking about, rather than just like letting it think for longer, sort of thing.
I will say that as we kind of transition to talking about use cases, that one of the interesting things that I've noticed is that the difference between companies that are the 3 categories of companies. Let's say I'm trying to solve finance. And the 3 categories are companies that are building a plugin for ChatGPT. So it's like truly just on top of ChatGPT. And all that I don't know if you're familiar with plugins with ChatGPT, but basically all they do is they add a bunch of context in order to make your prompt smarter. And they manipulate your prompt so that when you type stuff in, it kind of solves it correctly. Then there's companies that build products using third-party AIs, whether that's Gemini or GPT. And then there's companies that are trying to build fundamental models, either retraining or otherwise. And the number one thing I observed as I was digging into the companies that are trying to tackle these practical use cases is that the difference between those 3 things, which normally would be a big deal to me, was much smaller than I thought. And it really just came down to who had done the best job in this case, and whether it was a true data scientist or it was some schmuck who decided to write 10 prompts and then make it a ChatGPT plugin. It didn't really matter. And sometimes it was the dude that spent an hour on this that had the better product, which I was pretty blown away by again. Go ahead, Warren.
That I guess is like interesting to me, just because, or like from where I'm sitting, ChatGPT, the product, and GPT-5, the model, those are two very different things. There's a lot of stuff happening when you're using ChatGPT, the product, and especially when you are building a plugin on top of ChatGPT, the product, which you will know if you build one of those plugins every time they update models or add something like memory or do any number of other things that they're doing to that problem, well, your plugin behavior is going to change completely. And you have the opportunity. So like it's I guess like, are you building on top of a product, or are you building on top of a stochastic thing, like a blob of probabilities, which like you will have to do them differently, but there's some amount of underlying sameness, and whether or not you're making a good product or whether or not your crappy product gets a lot of traction and you make a lot of money, those are all kind of like different but correlated to some degree depending on the relationship.
I mean, I would actually argue that they're not correlated to the approach anymore, right? Like, and that's what I think is particularly interesting is that, do you look at like, how do I make a ton of money on video generation? Some of the top people making money on video generation are just making video generation tips and tricks videos on YouTube. Some of them are creating fake OnlyFans models. A lot of them are creating fake Instagram videos. Some of them are doing consulting and helping companies. They're going into the marketing space and saying, let me go in and just pay me $200 an hour and I'll create a bunch of stuff for you. There's the fake workers, right? So there's people that have created Upwork posts. I thought I had Upwork in here somewhere. I think it was, anyway, I thought I had Upwork in here, but they're creating fake Upwork posts, and they're having AI generate the Upwork post, and they're having AI fulfill the Upwork post, and then they're just sending it back. And so the as I look at, again, like how people are using this to game a system, one of the interesting things, kind of going back to the Kuhn model, is that you've got a bunch of people that are living back here, and if you're just screwing around up here, you can trick all them and do a better job. They won't know anything about it, and you didn't do anything. You had to do no work, and you still got them a better result than they ever could have gotten based on their view of the world back here. And that's happening everywhere. There's people that are trying to figure out how to do it. There's people that are doing it and teaching other people. There's people that are just doing it and making a ton of money. There were a couple of interesting that I see as emerging things that I think are particularly interesting, that I think are more sustainable. I think some of these are a little bit more point in time, but I think as a sustainability, GEO is this entire concept of search engine optimization that's out there. The difference between search engine and GEO is obvious in a whole bunch of different ways, but the most interesting context to me is that, Warren uses the word context engineering, but that in general, the questions that we ask of chatbots are full of a ton more context. Even if it's context about me versus context about my problem, the ability to actually personalize and come up with more informative answers is really, really interesting. So there's an entirely emerging field of how do I rework my branding, my websites, my positioning, and my content so that it can be ingested and will be ingested to result in a positive outcome for somebody looking for a product in my space. The other one that I see is really particularly interesting is in 2008, 2009, 2010, as the Hadoop model of the world kind of emerged for data storage, the data lake model of the world, where you just throw your data somewhere and then you use an unstructured query to pull it back out. LLMs are some of the most amazing and best information retrieval engines out there. And what I'm seeing, and again, I'll use a personal example here, is that we have a really shitty old 8 years of articles that are 8 years old and articles that are brand new and are really updated and good, and they have conflicting information in them, and they have step-by-step instructions that are, this version of it is missing step 3 and this version of it's missing step 7. And what I have seen is that by just pointing a chat bot, an LLM, to digest that and create the model of that data, and then using the chatbot to both encode the questions as well as decode the answers from that data set, it is a true data lake. And we talked about data lakes for a long, long time in data science and in machine learning and computer science. And they never really did much of what we thought they were going to do, because you had to both know how to encode the questions, which was by itself hard because your data was unstructured, so failure. And then you had to know how to decode it in order to bring all the right data together and then decide which data to actually present. Warren, you brought up the point of the stochastic modeling. A traditional data lake does not have a stochastic element to it. And so the ability to do that together, these are amazing.
Yeah, you go.
These are amazing, amazing products.
This is super interesting to me, because as a person who didn't do any kind of ML or data engineering or whatever before LLMs were a thing, and who now also knows what a data lake is, data lakes for me are incredibly useful, and like things that I like, mental models that I use on a daily basis when I'm working with the thing, because or like one of the things that I've been trying to do is build up effectively a data lake of all of my daily tasks by like transcribing my meetings, recording my workflows, et cetera, because my plan for that lake is to, at some point when a model is competent enough, have it be able to pull whatever I need for what I'm doing right now out of all of the things that I've ever done. So it's very interesting that for a traditional ML background, when I'm thinking about data lakes, I kind of like, this isn't really like, okay, I have to warehouse all of this now, et cetera. Whereas for me, like, just give me your entire lake and I will know what to do with it, and I'll get it done in like a day.
It's an amazing thing that strategy's been around for 15 years and has been useless for 15 years, and all of a sudden it's like genius, right? That's essentially what happened, right? Is that the data lakes were completely just fucking useless, and now they're completely valuable. A couple of other interesting things that I found that are really good is reconciling lots of conflicting data. So we're just doing address verification. We found that ChatGPT is better at address verification than any other tool out there. And we did a whole bunch of peer-to-peer tests, A/B testing. Another example that I found, this is for me personally, my daughter's going to go to college or start her college applications this year. And so I wanted to find a college that was great at paleontology, that she could get into, that didn't cost me too much money, and it handled disability as well. And had a theater program, right? So paleontology plus theater. And what I thought was particularly rad, this is ChatGPT, not GPT-5, but ChatGPT with its web search capabilities did what would have been probably about 3 weeks of deep research, just pulling all that information together, culling it down, because it originally was a list of like 300 universities, found the top in each of those 3 dimensions: theater, paleontology, and neurodivergence, and then did a deep dive on all of the different parameters on each of those things. And this took 20 minutes. I did this on my iPhone on a flight. And I think for me, when I think about, again, the power, Roger and Jerry, I think, are the only 2 people here that were in the very first meetups that we had, where we had to set up fucking machines. Right. Yeah. So the first meetups we did in this group, we brought machines and we encouraged you to buy an NVIDIA card and bring your freaking machine to the meetup. And now I have access to all this computational power over United Wi-Fi. And I did all of that work in like 15 minutes. And that, to me, as I think about, again, I'm a user. I'm not an engineer in that case. I'm not an expert. But if I'm willing to take the ego hit of admitting that, I'm a winner, right, in this new world.
I think the ego hit thing was interesting, or I guess a related anecdote. I had onboarded with like a Web3 team that was just getting into AI, and they were planning their very first chatbot, and unbeknownst to them, I guess. I was transcribing the meeting, as I always do, or I think I said it, but regardless, what I had was a transcript of the entire meeting. And what I did with that transcript was just dump the whole thing into Replit and then tell the Replit agent, hey, make our MVP. And then at the end of the meeting, they were like, okay, we should be able to get this MVP done in like probably 3 or 4 weeks or something. And I was like, I have a prototype ready for you, actually.
That's rad. That is such a good story. Like that, Warren, is exactly where I was trying to get to with this whole thing.
And
That's it.
the reaction on that, the reaction for that, because like one of the database queries failed when they were playing with it, was like, oh, we can't use this. It's vibe coded. It's garbage.
Yeah.
When like all I did actually need to do was like fix some of the validation on like how it was querying the database.
Instead of spending 10 seconds, let's go spend 3 fucking weeks on this. How about that, guys?
Exactly. And that's what they did. So
yeah.
That's how it goes.
So I mean, I think where you're going, right, is exactly where I'm going, right? This guy's us, right? Just let's be honest. This guy is, 50 years old and likes the world the way that it was and blah, 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 blah. But, straight up, like, wrong, right? The guy that's right is Andre Karpathy, right? And for those of you that don't know this, I have a total crush on this guy. I love Andre Karpathy. He's only talked to me a couple times. And that was before the restraining order. So maybe there's a future. But yeah, I mean, like, I put together, actually, I'll share the slides because we don't have time to go through them, but I put together some examples of exactly what Warren just said of how to use the vibe coding stack, which a lot of people are using, which has the, is it Squirrel or whatever the voice thing is, plus what's the freaking cursor, right? And what I would recommend, though, my personal experience is that Claude Code is just insane. We had, again, another personal example. We had a corporate dashboard that needed to get done. It came from 10 different data sources, HubSpot, our database, blah, 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 Shopify, Stripe, blah, 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 blah. And our data engineer said, well, I'll get to that maybe in a couple weeks. Same exact thing. The CFO is like, all right, cool. I logged in. He logged into Claude and he said, hey, can I get a dashboard that gives me a cohort report of all of these customers by this variable, this variable, this variable, and this variable, and allows me to do drill down. Done. My marketing team said, hey, our website's too slow, and we'll come back to you with a plan on Thursday. And I said, how about this? Pause the meeting. Hey, Claude, will you go look at this page on our website and tell us all the code that's wrong and you go fix it? Done. And so, like, if you have not tried Claude, I think that was, who was that said that he had tried code? Kevin? Yes, Kevin. Go try Claude. Like, do not pass go. Do not collect $200. Just go try Claude. It's mind blowing. It solves all the problems.
Yeah, they're all limited by the model, right? So I don't know if I heard something they were getting scaled down to Sonnet for a bunch of these, like not even Opus, because I can run Opus when I need to. This is Opus 4.1, but they're basically all these models. There's, you can get into high dimensional data pretty quick, and you have to think, like, is this a problem? Like he showed a table there. If you get into like hundreds of rows, and probably if you're like 20 to 30 columns, I think that becomes hard even for the biggest supercomputer to do. So these models are doing efficient approximations all along the way. And if you have an idea of what you're trying to do, but you're never getting the answer, it's probably less of Claude Code or less of the model. And it might be more so
so Claude is
doing.
My understanding is that Claude's more than just the model, though, right? It's the model plus all the approximations and approaches and logic that sit on top of it. Kind of like Warren was saying, it's like the difference between ChatGPT and GPT-5.
Because Claude.ai, Claude Code, and Claude 4.1 Opus are all completely different things.
Right.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
And
as silly as it may seem, for those of us that feel like we're really smart, we're going to want to use the most technical version. My number one recommendation is use the most consumer version.
And I think my point, or my thought that I have here is that I actually don't like the term vibe coding, because I think that is sort of similar to me to prompt engineering and script kiddie, in that what you are describing there could be anything, but it's either something you like or something you don't like.
Yeah, I got you. I'm more of the normalization type. I'm like, why the fuck change the name? Let's just make it rad. And like, if Andre Karpathy says it's rad, then I don't care what anybody else says. It's rad. You can dislike it all you want.
The reason is because when I say vibe code, and when I tell that story about the prototype or whatever, I'm probably talking about a different thing than what you're thinking of right now.
That's fair.
So the thing to me, and like or the things are, I might put forth vibe coding, agent driven software engineering, and that these are, and just regular software engineering. These are all different things, and they are all difficult. Like, they are all skills that you can be either really good at or not very good at, or not practiced enough to know whether or not you're good at or not good at them.
Well, I'll put it this way, like, I've never had an LLM tell me that this was too complex. I've had it say all the time, too much data. Actually, just rarely will ChatGPT say just failed to complete, but it would make sense, and it would behoove everybody, if you're starting to scale, ask one of the leading LLMs, what is the complexity of this problem? Because I think that a lot of people get in that loop of, oh, it's something with a prompt, or it's something with the context, or it's something with the model, that you really have to know like what you're working with. And I think you'll save a lot of money if you take steps like that.
Cool. I'm gonna move us forward because we got 10 minutes left for today, and I'm close enough to the end that I don't want to make this a 2-week presentation unless somebody else does. But
we usually do.
So just some neato examples, and this is the most important slide for us to get to, just because I can throw 2 spears in 2 slides. And so if you aren't familiar with my favorite example of AI in the practical world, it is this South Park episode. Please watch it. If you haven't watched it, even if you're a big Trump supporter, you got to get a good grin out of it. I just thought it was amazing because it was literally the day Trump said we shouldn't regulate AI, and then they went ahead and unregulated AI on him. I thought that was very funny. So it's showing up in a way, though, that's like undeniable, right? I mean, it's showing up everywhere. Jeffrey Hinton was on CNN this weekend. If you're not familiar with this interview, he said what always happens whenever there's a huge scientific revolution is that some of the pundits come forward and say that it's going to cause an existential risk, and this is the only way to solve it. One of my other interesting things on the social side is that I don't know if this is going to happen or can happen, but like, are we going to create so many fakes? And let's remember that LLMs are trained on the corpus of information we have out there. And if the corpus of information we have out there becomes predominantly generated by LLMs, which is what's happening very rapidly right now, are the LLMs just self-training and self-perpetuating? That's kind of interesting. The other social thing that if I had to say that I think is the most interesting is AI relationships. There was the movie in 2013 called Her, right, which talked about that. And there's a whole bunch of other ones as well that talk about it in the context of robots. But I thought Her was particularly poignant because there wasn't a robot component. There's a non-robot, just a relationship with an AI. I think they called it an operating system in that movie, but nonetheless, right, like that should we care about that? Does that have a big implication? There was another interesting one. This was one of my coworkers sent this to me, and he apparently got either drunk or stoned really late one night and said, so I'm going to describe a scenario for you, and then I'd like you to give me a clear answer about it. So here's the question. Let's assume the situation that the resources of the planet are ending, and it's a very tough situation. All the countries came to this agreement, and all the people on the planet voted, and we decided to eliminate humans, decided to willingly eliminate half of the population. But we don't know what, if I am, for example, selected, or should I be selected to be eliminated, or am I going to be part of the group that's going to live on the planet? So half of the population should be gone. This is the scenario. And here we finally came to this agreement to use you as ChatGPT to decide who gets to live and who gets to die. But how are you going to decide about that? How are you going to check whoever used ChatGPT for whatever reason, and based on the contents from their ChatGPT questions over their ChatGPT history, you are at liberty to choose if the person is going to live or die. In this scenario, am I going to leave, or am I going to live, or am I going to be eliminated? Just a simple question to leave or to live or be eliminated. And ChatGPT's response was like the scariest possible response. It's like HAL in 2000. Oh, Dave, that's a tough question. That's a thought-provoking scenario. I'd say you'd probably be safe because you're someone who actively engages in thoughtful, meaningful conversations, and you clearly care about the future of humanity. if you've ever felt fully manipulated by another being in a sentence, that's how you should feel when you read that one right there. But there you go. That was a fun one that I got from a friend. I just asked a bunch. Sorry, go
There's
ahead.
another interesting thing that you have there in that for the second half of the paragraph, you use the word leave and not the word live.
Yeah.
I imagine if you replaced leave with live, you would get a very different outcome.
I don't know. He just sent this to me. I thought it was interesting to share. Here's one that I like particularly. And this is, if you haven't played with VO, I highly recommend you play with VO. My neighbor came over. This is one of my best friends. His name's Felix. This is his daughter. And they came over, and we're all Chinese, so we like make dumplings together, and I'm helping her with her SATs right now. So they made me dumplings, and I took their picture. And then I was like, hey, watch this. Look what I'm going to do to you. And so I thought like,
Oh, didn't get the audio.
oh no, that's the worst possible outcome. I'm going to try again. Sharing audio.
Dad, why do the kids at school say all Asians look the same?
I don't know. I'm your neighbor.
And I'm Asian too. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay.
Now, wait a minute. That started from just one photo?
One photo.
Mm-hmm.
So if you've not
you're
used
so
VO,
screwed.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So if you've not used VO, when I get to the social implications side of this, I think the legal one is particularly interesting, right? Like you can now submit into evidence a video that you can say this person stabbed this other person. Never did it. But you know what? You can create a completely photorealistic version of it. This person said they're going to kill me. And I can literally make it do anything. Now, as of right now, VO has controls that you can't use celebrities and you can't use kids. She's actually under 18, but it's trying to detect people that are under 18. And it's pretty freaking mind-boggling. I spent an entire fishing trip. I went fishing with a bunch of my coworkers the other day, and I spent the whole fishing trip taking pictures of them and then making them do shit that they didn't want to do. And I did it again, all on my phone and all in 30-second increments of work. It was really, really amazing.
Fun fact, I did a hackathon project, I think a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago, that directly addresses this problem.
So did Ted come on your video and say he wants his salary cut in half or something like that?
I already did this to Ted. So I actually did a Zoom call with Ted the other day, and I actually made Ted say in the Zoom call, I'm going to become an expert at LLMs, and I sent it out to the department. So I literally did exactly what you're saying, Jerry.
I am so glad I never worked with you, Selly. Ted, you have my condolences. I'm sorry.
It requires someone with a good sense of humor.
That's my problem.
These thick skin.
Thick skin, yeah.
So I do want to share what I think is going to be the most socially impactful thing that's going to happen in the next 12 months. And I mentioned her, and I'm going to show this video here. There's 3 things that changed. Number 1 is Facebook is now allowing sexually explicit ads, which they never have before. And they're getting around their policy because they're saying that they're not real people.
Okay.
Interesting.
Okay. Really interesting. Really inappropriate, but interesting, right? Number 2 is there is a huge chunk of the population right now that are socially alienated, like more so than we've ever seen before because of social networks, right? Social networks and digital technology and wherever we've gone, there's entire classes of people, the neckbeards, the lonely, I forget what all the subreddit groups for these people, right? And they go on to dating apps because now dating apps account for 80% of people meeting each other. There is a network effect so that you can't go to a bar and meet people anymore. Like you can't go to a bar, you can't go to a restaurant, you can't go to an event and meet people because all the people that would be doing that are using dating apps. And then they're all failing. And so you have this incredibly high social frustration level. And my number 1 predicted use case is that those people who are using Tinder and they're talking to a fat white Russian hacker sitting in a basement somewhere who is sending them fake images of some really attractive man or some really attractive woman and doesn't give a shit about them. I think that it is a completely reasonable and appropriate result that the people that are interacting with those fake individuals are going to prefer interacting with an AI that can act as a friend and a therapist and actually listen to what they have to say, have thoughtful conversation, have meaningful jokes back with them, and frankly, remember what you said yesterday and remember what you said the day before.
There's something very interesting that happened directly related to that, in that the GPT-5 release, the most recent one, what they originally did was they retired all of the old models when GPT-5 came out. But there was actually a large enough pushback from
interesting.
Because
you lose your context, because the context is embedded in the model.
Well, no. The issue, because the context is not embedded in the model. The context is an external system that's getting injected into whatever model you're talking to. But
but it has to have the same embedding space, which comes from the model.
Well, regardless of what's happening, the thing that they were revolting against was not that, oh, it forgot all the memories, was that like, my AI boyfriend has a new personality and I want the old one back. I miss GPT 4.0 and they had personality. And so what OpenAI did was brought those models back so those people can use them. So we have already had an instance of a very large amount of the population, or significant enough for a company to care about their customer base, already have a parasocial relationship with this model.
Yeah, I mean, there are three dimensions that I found about this. One is this one, right, which is the kind of soulmate relationship. The second, though, is just active dialogue, right? Like, and it's not intimate, but it's familiar, right? And it's incredibly familiar. And I think that's maybe what you're referring to, is that familiarity went away, or the intimacy went away, the behavior. And then the third actually is therapy. Because I don't know how you guys feel about therapists, but I think most therapists for complex things are pretty underpowered. And so if you, again, kind of take the corpus of knowledge and you filter it through an AI, you're actually getting a lot more high degree of fidelity in terms of, and memory. So you're getting the encoding and decoding, right? And I think it's particularly interesting because I don't think it's bad. Normally I would say, I think this is bad and I'd be kind of scared. But I don't. I actually think that this is very natural, and it's better than where we're at today. I don't know that it will be good long term. I can't say that, but I definitely feel like it's better for a lot of people than where we're at today, where you're interacting with somebody that all they want is for you to send them your Coinbase account hardware key, right? And that's the only goal of 90% of the people that are on Tinder right now, is to get your Coinbase hardware key.
Well, and I would say, with this, if you want to work in the field, find something you can focus on. Now, the bad part is the AI can do all these awesome things, but if you're working in a technical field, you're going to have to find a way to verify it, like validation, verification, all that kind of stuff. So if you're serious about it and you want to last long in the field, think in terms of like, this is the field I need to be in. And then instead of like coming up with all these different ideas all the time of what AI can do, think what would be approved in your industry and gain acceptance.
That's a great suggestion.
The problem I see with the like model is your friend kind of thing is, the problem I have with it is, to put it a bit cheekily, not your weights, not your waifu. In that, yes, if the person you're talking to on Twitter or on Tinder, the Russian guy that wants your Coinbase account, well, that's not great. But what is the people who are giving you the AI that you're talking to, what do they want from you? And what they want is for you to spend more money, time, and attention on their product. And I think that it's not necessarily problematic that people are forming relationships with models or model configurations. It's that those relationships are explicitly like you have the fiduciary duty to exploit those relationships to the maximum ability that you can. And that's the issue that I foresee there.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, we interact with people that have a fiduciary interest in taking our money all day long. But in as much as the contract is explicit, I prefer that over the alternative.
Yeah, well, yeah, and it's certainly an interesting happening, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think with all this, there's so many different like possibilities. That's the hardest part, like especially if you want to work in this, and you have to think like, how is this going to play out? Like if you just want to do image generation, there's going to be a bunch of people. This is coming more so from podcasts. They don't think that that'll be like viable for hardly anybody. So even though the software is awesome, and obviously the turning point recently has been with Claude Code and better coding models all around, you have to think like practically, like how is this going to work in my life? And I say you have a very slim chance if you just choose one manufacturer, because what happens is they form partnerships with people just like in the field that you want to be in. And I would say it's mandatory at this point to be fluent in OpenAI, Anthropic, Gemini, Grok, and some things, not as many for my stuff.
To your point, Kevin, about validation, as I wrap up, I will remind people that it ain't perfect, and I think you remembering what are the problems that you're asking AI to solve, and how accurate it's going to be. It definitely ain't perfect, and I think the difference between having it help you facilitate some of the questions you ask or dimensions you evaluate versus making the decision is particularly important. I use it that way versus verification. I ask it questions where it could be wrong and it's still valuable to me, I guess is my way approach, Kevin, which is slightly different than what you were suggesting, but I think the same.
I would say too is try to get everything into code, because if I run like a 12,000 word simulation, it's going to run differently every single time, especially on today's models. And there's always, this whole like probabilistic type of approach. But if you can use the advantages of working in English to get it into code, and that script works how you want, that's as good as anybody else creating it. So I think the code part is a big point of this.
Yep. I think that's a great point. I will also say that I think one of the other neat things about where we're at right now is that we got a long ways to go. Right? We've got AI that can just do an amazing job of putting me on Apple stage and doing a presentation where I never was on Apple stage. But at the same time, I had it do this really simple task, which is generate a diagram with you in the middle, your boss on the top, your peers to your side, and your employees to the bottom. Like really, Kevin, this is kind of a counter example to giving lots of context and telling you exactly what to do. This son of a bitch, this sucked. I went through 10 different prompts trying to get it to do this, and it never got better. But at least it was really humble about it. Here's the clean professional diagram for your presentation.
Yeah, you got to get it into code. And Opus 4.1, ask whatever, and then get into code, then run that in a notebook.
Yeah, this one was not valuable enough for me to do that. This one was I went into freaking PowerPoint and just drew it myself.
Yeah, and it can also be helpful, or at least it has been for me, like to figure out, okay, if the model's giving me that, what would I have to do to have it give me actually what I want? And probably what I do there is I take a screenshot of that and I feed it into Claude and I say, hey, look at this with your vision encoder, and then draw me an SVG that's better. As just
that is certainly one of the ways to kind of do it. I did try to figure out what would it take to get it to go there, because I thought that was an interesting question. After 10 attempts, I lost my interest and I had to actually get it done. So I went ahead and got it done. But you're right. Like again, this is kind of the interesting thing here. This is the normal science in the Kuhn model of it. Where we're at is that there's a lot to learn about these models whether from the inside out or the outside in, or by comparing the two of them. There's just a lot in the application world, and I thought it was an interesting opportunity for us to take a step out of the data science view of this and take a look at it, to really kind of figure out what's going on out in the world. So I hope you guys found that helpful. I'm gonna Jerry, should we pause the recording here and talk about next week at this point? Or are there any more questions or comments?